the Jewish Channel's Week in Review. Jonathan Pollard set to be released, celebrating the life of Sophie Tucker, and more of the Jewish news that's changing your world right now in this episode of the Week in Review. Hello, and welcome to the Jewish Channel's Week in Review. I'm Stephen I. Weiss. Jonathan Pollard is set to be released on parole on November 20th, one day short of 30 years after his arrest for espionage against the United States on behalf of Israel. Pollard's release had been rumored for weeks. The U.S. Parole Commission handed down the decision on Tuesday, leading to instant declarations of gratitude from leading Israeli officials. Many American Jewish leaders and Israeli government officials have advocated loudly, passionately, and persistently for Pollard's release for decades. He pleaded guilty to espionage in 1987, saying that he'd provided Israel with enough documents to occupy 360 cubic feet, while being paid approximately $50,000 by the State of Israel over the course of several years. That's about $100,000 in today's dollars. The timing of Pollard's release raises obvious questions about whether it is connected with the Iran nuclear deal. While officials in both the U.S. and Israel will surely deny this, it is clear that at least the current Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, has made Pollard's release a subject of discussions with President Barack Obama and cabinet officials, even amid discussions of Iran nuclear negotiations and Israeli-Palestinian relations. Going back to 1998, when Netanyahu was first in office, he pushed for Pollard's release as part of the Wye River Accord, a deal between Israelis and Palestinians led by the Clinton administration. Throughout the recent years of Netanyahu's second run of being prime minister, reports have surfaced of Netanyahu tying Pollard's release to various aspects of Israeli-Palestinian negotiations. Netanyahu also made these requests amid the Iran nuclear negotiations, including in conversation with Secretary of State John Kerry in December of last year, just after Kerry had resumed the Iran nuclear talks. Meantime, within Israel, 2 men were sentenced to multiple years in prison for setting fire to a Jewish Arab school in Jerusalem. The crime, committed last November and caught on a school security camera, saw one classroom significantly damaged and the spray painting of hate messages including "Kahana was right," "End assimilation," and "No coexistence with cancer." The 2 men, who are brothers, Shlomo and Nachman Tweedo, reportedly said the attacks were, quote, worth the price as they were leaving their sentencing hearing, and then broke out into song. Here in America, a financial crime allegedly took place in the Orthodox Jewish community in Brooklyn. According to the New York Attorney General's office, a charity called the National Children's Leukemia Foundation raised nearly $10 million between 2009 and 2013 and only paid out less than $60,000 of that to patients. More than 80% of the money allegedly went to telemarketing and direct mail fundraising campaigns, and to the one man operating the charity, Tzvi Shore, who paid himself approximately $600,000 in salary, an additional $600,000 in deferred compensation, and a $100,000 lifetime pension. Shore actually did have a son who died of leukemia in 1991. Moving on to a story of someone who never got a pension, the famous performer Sophie Tucker is the subject of a new documentary, as Meredith Gansman reports.
If you look up chutzpah in the dictionary, Lloyd and Susan Ecker say you'll find groundbreaking comedian Sophie Tucker's picture alongside the definition.
When you leave me, you know it's gonna grieve me. Gonna miss your big fat mama, your fat mama. Some of me dead.
Husband and wife documentarians Susan and Lloyd Ecker produced the new documentary about Tucker, The Outrageous Sophie Tucker. Why now did you think it's time that we should have a piece about Sophie, a documentary about Sophie Tucker?
I think that in this era of fat shaming, Sophie is a great role model. Back in 1906, she was singing songs like I'm fat and I like it. You know, nobody loves a fat girl, but oh, how a fat girl can love.
Let me tell you a secret. A steak a day keeps the doctor away.
Known as the last of the Red Hot Mamas, singer and entertainer Sophie Tucker was born Sonia Kalish in 1886 in Ukraine to an Orthodox Jewish family who immigrated to the United States and settled in Hartford, Connecticut, where they opened a kosher restaurant which was frequented by touring Yiddish performers. How did Sophie come into the entertainment world and the entertainment business? She did not come from a line of entertainers.
No, Sophie and her father, mostly her father, got the idea, well, you already have the Yiddish theater people, go to the vaudeville place, which we don't have, stand at the back door, and when they come out of the back door, give them a flyer about our restaurant. And one day she heard the music, She went into the theater, peeked through, and watched a few acts, and that was it. Of course, she didn't know how to sing, she didn't know how to act, she didn't know anything, but she was very, very loud.
In 1903, at 16, Tucker married Louis Tuck and gave birth to her son Albert in 1906. But soon after, the couple separated and Tucker left the baby with her sister in order to pursue her dreams of performing.
She did things her own way.
Yeah.
So she left, and she knew that she was going to be shunned, which she was. But she knew that when she came back as a headliner, they would all kiss her feet, which they did.
With no formal training, she developed her style by learning on the job, performing on the vaudeville circuit.
So even in the early days when she came on stage and she did a twirl in a costume once and they went hysterical and she didn't even know why. And she went with it, and it turned out the back of her dress was open and they could see her bloomers. And she kept it in the act after that.
That's unbelievable. Right. Anything for a laugh.
Anything to entertain.
Soon, Tucker met theater owner turned talent agent William Morris, who introduced a certain innuendo into her act, which often got her in trouble, the Eckers explained.
And if he's all there in his silk pajamas, why, he can have the best of all the red-hot mamas.
My boyfriend has the biggest dinghy in the Navy.
Got it.
And that got her arrested.
And that got her, that kind of thing would get her.
And then the whole story went viral in 1910.
Right.
And she was in every newspaper in the United States from that day on. She never played to an empty seat.
Marketing became Tucker's specialty.
Before there was Facebook, there was Tucker Book.
Hello everybody, this is my first trip to Miami Beach.
For more on the outrageous Sophie Tucker, tune in to the full broadcast version of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Meredith. Finally, this week on Up Close, as Asian economies increasingly rise in prominence and productivity, the home of more than half the world's population becomes an increasing part of our discussion in the West. Two journalists in this week's episode offer varying looks at some of the more prominent countries in the region. First, Tracy Dalby spent decades going in and out of Japan, China, Vietnam, and more. Reflecting on his reporting for National Geographic and other publications, he discusses his book, Into the Field, a Foreign Correspondent's Notebook. And then, one country that stands as a major outlier in the region for seeing no rise in prosperity at all is North Korea. Former Washington Post correspondent Blaine Hardin examines the country as a study in contrast in The Great Leader and the Fighter Pilot, the true story of the tyrant who created North Korea and the young lieutenant who stole his way to freedom. Here are some of the highlights from my interview with Tracy Dalby. You saw over several decades an opportunity where certain Asian countries were going through change, but also how America was constantly changing in its relationship as you were an American exploring these areas. And one of those questions you keep bumping up against is this constant reminder by people in these countries that you can't possibly understand what it's like to be here. You can't possibly understand what it's like to be in real Japan, real Vietnam, and so on and so forth, because you've got your American mindset. How do you bridge that divide?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think you're always, as a foreign correspondent, pushing your way through that door marked no entry. And, once you get inside the other culture, you really need to develop some tools for trying to get farther into the story. I mean, I really, this book is kind of a love letter to the craft of long-distance reporting, but it's also a plea for, the survival, the maintenance of immersive reporting.
And we see today a lot of journalism, or a lot of what's called explainer journalism, of people kind of trying to have immediate takes, immediate opinions about anything from, Cy Hirsch's story about the bin Laden capture to whatever Vladimir Putin is doing, to any of the noise we're hearing out of North Korea or China or what have you. And a lot of the people writing this are people who are desk-bound, who are young, and don't have specific experience in the field, but the idea being that they can somehow gather these facts with the internet and with all the information that's available.
I call it digital gotcha. The speed bump that young people have today particularly is, we're flooded by information, and it splits our focus, and the danger is that it makes us think we understand things when we don't. In my generation, it was completely opposite. It was the economy of scarcity. You know, we didn't know nothing about nothing, although we might have kind of a dream and a fairy tale to explore the world, but we were really, you know, it was hard to find information. Now we have exactly the opposite problem. So I think the danger is that you start lining up those facts, but without the deeper context, without an understanding of history, without an understanding of kind of the, you know, not to put it too large, but the human condition, it's very difficult to get that formula right.
You can see the full episode of Up Close on the Jewish Channel on cable. You can also listen to the full audio of Up Close as a podcast available on iTunes or in your favorite podcast player. That's all for this week. From all of us here at the Jewish Channel, be well. The Jewish Channel is available on cable. Time Warner Cable Channel 1640, iOpling Channel 505, RCN Channel 268, Cox Cable Channel 1, Bright House Channel 330, Verizon Fios Channel 900, and on Comcast on the on-demand menu on premium channels. For more information, visit tjctv.com.